Hi, everybody.
Hello, hello. Welcome to another installment of the Hidden Compass Article Club.
That's right. We're back one more time to talk about Tracks of the Past by Diane Selkirk.
Another story in our winter 2020 issue.
2021.
Right.
Yes, that happened. That happened a couple months ago.
I don't even know what year it is anymore, but now that we've established what year we're in, winter 2021
Yes.
issue, Tracks of the Past, which is the last story in the winter 2021 issue to have an article club up.
Right.
But certainly not the least.
Definitely not. And we're excited to chat about it. But while we're waiting for people to join, let's do our thing and chit chat a little bit about something else while we're waiting for people to join us.
Sounds good. I've been thinking a lot, actually, related to this piece about post-pandemic travel. Actually, I've been thinking about that the entire time we've been in the pandemic. So I miss travel so much.
Yeah.
And for a long time, I just imagined that there'd be this finish line of herd immunity, and then I would go everywhere constantly. But I'm starting to think that it's probably not going to be that way, that I'm probably going to want to be a lot more thoughtful and careful about the kind of trips that I am taking.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I definitely feel like the last year has sort of been a forced detox from constant movement, at least for me. And I know that initially I think I felt the same way too, that there were just all the places I was supposed to go that I had, that I already had plans for, and all of that was obviously canceled, which was totally understandable. But now when I think about where I want to go and how I want to go, it's definitely, it's definitely more thoughtful than I think it was before.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I've been thinking about this just in everyday activities, very aware of the economic impact.
Sure.
And I think of my actions. And I think that's something that's at the forefront of our cultural mindset, at least for a lot of us, that we're thinking about small and local businesses in our communities.
Right.
And what I'm really excited to see is how much of that flows over into a world where we can travel and we're visiting other communities.
Right.
And how we think about supporting local businesses, local organizations and companies through travel.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hope that that ends up being the case. I know that supporting local businesses has definitely become more of a priority for me during this time and for a lot of people. And I definitely think that, as a country, we're kind of talking the talk. I hope that we also walk the walk. I mean, and I hope that that translates to the extent that we are, in fact, supporting our local businesses and things like that now. I hope that translates to when we're abroad and when we're in communities where, our support of them, our economic support as we travel, can go a long way if we're more thoughtful about it. And I hope that that does, in fact, translate.
Yeah, I think it will depend. I think certain people will definitely walk the walk and others won't. But what makes me optimistic is looking back and seeing how this thoughtfulness around travel was here before the pandemic.
Yeah.
And perhaps it has a little bit more momentum now.
Right. Definitely. Yeah, I think there's a lot that we're going to learn about how things have changed, and not necessarily in bad ways. Some in a lot of ways potentially for the better, and the possibilities of that post pandemic as we do pay more attention to how we impact the places we go. I think is a huge thing, a huge positive thing to look forward to.
Yeah. Well, I'm really excited to talk about our story today, Tracks to the Past by Diane Selkirk, because it does thread into this forward-looking narrative of possibility,
Right.
especially around travel. So let's talk about why we assigned this story and why this is a Hidden Compass piece.
Definitely. I think one of the things that stood out for me when we first saw this story was the personal connection. I mean, and it started with a pitch, not a full story submission. And it was the personal connection, because anyone can write about the mythology of the North and about the importance of indigenous led tourism. But it was Diane's personal connection that intrigued us the most, and gave us a window into the complexities that generally come with a Hidden Compass story.
Yeah, I remember reading that line in her pitch where she mentioned her perspective, saying, as someone who grew up in an indigenous community, I've learned how the land is perceived when seen through the eyes of people who've lived off of it. And that was one of those gems in a pitch where we just pull it out and say, where can this take us?
Right.
And that led to a thread of her piece that has become probably my favorite part of the story, which is Diane's quest to excavate her own family's history.
Right. And that personal story is a complement to the larger cultural story that we're talking about in this piece, right? The cultural genocide that happened throughout the continent. And so having her personal connection into that, I think, deepens the story for the reader.
Yes, that's the power of story,
Right.
is to bring us down to the level of individuals who have lived through monumental historical changes,
Right.
and dark ones.
Definitely. And that darkness seems like it would obviously be a chasing demon story for us, but we tend to veer away from the obvious, and bringing out that personal side and the challenges of that excavation, as you called it, turned this more into a quest story than a chasing demon story for us.
Yes, yeah, and that's such an interesting part of this piece, is not only the history that she brings to light, but the struggle she has to go through in order to dig through and find the truth, which is a theme that comes up. It's come up for us before for our other stories that delve into horrific histories. Like I'm thinking of Wade in the Water by Alexandria Scott, who delved into her own family's history going back to times of slavery, and how one of the biggest challenges of that piece was that it's so hard to find information, documentation from that time. And so that struggle just in itself of pushing to find out more during times that, people have tried to hush over or forget or push aside or bury, is important and fascinating in itself.
Definitely. Or even, at the far end of that spectrum, to completely erase and to delve into that and figure out, what might still be there is always a fascinating and important exercise. Let's talk about Diane for a second, because as someone to write a quest story, as a contributor to actually author a quest story, she's a really good choice, which is something we kind of mentioned when we gave the overview of the stories way back when we launched the issue a few weeks ago. But she's been on long, difficult, beautiful quests before, specifically circumnavigating the globe on a 40-foot sailboat.
Which is something that you personally know what it's like. Savani has sailed across tumultuous seas, and it's quite a thing, isn't it?
It is. I have not circumnavigated the globe, but I've definitely spent some time in the open water and in some rough seas. And that is, I think that, those words, that it's difficult, it's beautiful, right? I think all of those things are true. And this is something that Diane has done around the world, not just with other sailors and not just with, but with her husband, her daughter, and their cat. So it was a family trip. It was a family, that's how they lived while they circumnavigated the globe. And that's pretty cool.
Hey, and what an achievement. I think about the cats I had growing up and how they would not have taken to life on a sailboat.
Right.
What I like about Diane is that she navigates difficult journeys, but she does it from a place of curiosity.
Right.
And there's this line in her bio about how grocery stores can be as fascinating as museums, which just makes me smile.
Yeah.
Because it is that sense of curiosity and exploration that makes that is an important complement to overcoming the challenges of a quest.
Right. Yeah, and it's such a meaningful. It seems like a small observation, but when I read that line and I think about the grocery stores I've been in foreign countries and the things that you learn about a culture and about habits and things like that when you walk through something as simple as a grocery store, I think that's a great observation. I think it's a pretty meaningful observation.
It is. We
And
should also, oh, go ahead.
she's also been published widely. Um, she's been published by BBC Travel, National Geographic Traveler, CNN, Canadian Geographic, and others. And so she's coming to us with a wealth of experience writing for various publications and telling stories.
Yes. And she's also an author. She wrote a book called The Complete Idiot's Guide to Sailing, which, given her experience, makes sense.
Right.
Uh, and we also like that she aligns with our mission. I mean, I noticed that in her bio and her profile page, where she encourages people to toss away the bucket list and have more challenging, deeper experiences with travel. And that's something with which we wholeheartedly concur at Hidden Compass. So she's a good fit for many reasons.
Yes. Well, let's start into the piece itself.
Mm-hmm.
Because this piece does something really interesting in that it sort of, I guess the word excavate is going to come up a lot in this chat, right? It does excavate kind of the atrocities of the past, but it also balances that with the possibility of the future. So, you know, we literally in this piece, we start by getting a taste of the past, a literal taste of the past, and it's elusive, and it's a flavor and a connection and a wisdom that hasn't been lost, but has been forgotten. And I think that's a theme of this story. Is this theme of what has been forgotten, you know, but maybe not lost, and that's a compelling theme in this story.
Yeah, it's so alluring. It really draws you in, and you know, she does such a beautiful job of bringing this elusive flavor to life. And you have to read the story to really see how that comes through. But one thing that I think is really important to mention is that it shows it's more than one indigenous culture. Right. You know, we hear from the Inuit, we hear from a First Nation called the Nuu-chah-nulth, I think is the pronunciation of that. And this is important because there isn't just one indigenous experience in the North.
Exactly.
Wow.
But, you know, sadly, these indigenous experiences, of which there are many, are connected through a horrific history. And it's a term, you know, the cultural genocide is the name for that. And that's not just what we call it in this story, but that's what the Canadian government itself has acknowledged it to be, was this systematic attempt to erase the culture of the various indigenous peoples in Canada. And as we know, that's not confined to Canada, but this story takes place there.
Right. Yeah, across the continent, and it shows up in suppression of language, way of life, and tradition, and it's so staggering and so vast that it's hard to comprehend this sort of thing on a personal level, which is where I think this story really shines, because it brings you into that personal side of things. And it's not just the attempted erasure of all these cultures, but specifically of this woman and her legacy that appears throughout this story, and who Diane is trying to understand better. This woman who's connected to her family and her family lineage, but in a way that has been pushed aside, muffled, you know, this attempted erasure, not just of a culture, but of people, you know, these individuals who were a part of it.
Right. I think that's an important point that you just made about how when we hear about these horrific things throughout history, it's easy to lose sight of what it really means, right? We intrinsically know that it's bad, but without that touch point, it's hard to actually put the context of it together. And I think Diane provides us with a touch point to that story, to that broader story in this piece.
Yeah, to me, it's such an interesting constellation of emotions of rooting for Diane to find out more, but then also being afraid of the time in which she's digging around. And she really did have to dig to uncover the truth
Right.
About her family multiple generations later.
Definitely.
But she was able to connect with it. And it's like what you said just a few minutes ago, Savani, about that these are histories that are still there. They're still recoverable. A lot of this has been suppressed. A lot of it has been forgotten, but it's not totally gone.
Right. In a lot of cases, there is still something remaining, and it may not end up being the full history, but there are elements of it that are recoverable in some cases.
Yes. Yeah. And that balance in this story about the courage to go into the atrocities of the past while simultaneously bringing us into possibilities for the future. And Diane is able to tap into a part of her family's First Nation history that was forgotten but not lost. And we get to go along with her on that journey.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because she grew up with these tendrils of knowledge, and in fighting for that truth, she's bringing out more that can be passed on to future generations. And so she only had some knowledge, and even then there's a great line in there about this memory that had been forgotten, right? And so it is that, that history that's still there, even if it's not necessarily spoken about or not at the forefront of anyone's mind. But when something comes up that triggers the memory, and there are these memories that were previously forgotten, which I love.
I love that with the taste of the berries and
Right.
this idea of senses really bringing you back in time, and how that can be such a universal way to reach people who might not have that personal connection to the past in the way that Diane does and her family does.
Right.
But a taste or a smell that can bring you back to something that you didn't even remember that you forgot.
Right. Right. And now, the big picture is that you have a generation who might be able to learn more about their history and their culture because someone is trying to recover those memories.
Yeah, and that theme kind of ripples out from Diane's personal family history to others in the younger generation who are able to step into this new remembrance. And it goes even beyond people who have a familial connection to these Indigenous histories to the rest of us. And we talked about this at the beginning of this chat, this possibility for the future and what travel could look like.
Right.
And this theme of Indigenous-led tourism coming in here, which is very different than cultural tourism or tourism where Indigenous history is brought in and sometimes performed.
Right.
It's very different than having an experience where the Indigenous community is leading you through and introducing you to a place. And I remember all of these experiences I had when I was a kid where I had the former and not the latter, and how uncomfortable I felt.
Absolutely.
This idea of going to a place and learning about the history of a culture, and then, just so happens the culture is still alive, and here's a 15-minute presentation of a dance or a song or whatever, where you can tell even as a kid that that's not the fullness of the truth of now and of these people.
Right. I mean, and I think a lot of us have had those experiences, and it's easy to have those experiences. Often those are the ones that, when you go to a new place, those are the experiences that you're kind of shoved towards.
Mm-hmm.
But this explores the possibility, the story explores the possibility and kind of illuminates the possibility of a more thoughtful way of doing this, of Indigenous communities being able to decide what it is they're willing to share it on their own terms, and in a way where the people who are at the receiving end of that receive something more meaningful than just a 15-minute performance.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that really hooks into what I'm excited about moving forward. And this opportunity to not just remember what has happened in the past, but how to spread that knowledge.
Right, definitely. So I guess my next question is
Mm,
going to be about our hopes for this story, which you kind of jumped into a little bit,
mhm.
but do you want to go first or should I?
I'll go first because I already sort of went there.
You did. You started to go there, but there was more. And I'm sure there's more you want to say.
Yes, no, of course. I mean, I'm thinking about, so I worry about this tendency to look at horrific historical events and to be paralyzed by sadness. And especially for those of us whose ancestors were on the wrong side of history, guilt,
Right.
and how uncomfortable you can be to go back and address the full scope of history.
Right.
But my greatest hope for this story is that it will offer us a way to feel that horror and the hope. To not let the darkness of that past keep us in the dark
Right.
when it comes to what lies ahead, and to learn and be informed by that, and to move forward and pave a new path together.
Definitely. I mean, I think that's it's important, and it's not just the people whose ancestors may have been on the wrong side of history, but I also think that those of us whose ancestors may not have been, but who have also benefited from those things and those decisions, right? We kind of end up in the same place, and that guilt can keep us from actually making progress, right? And that sort of like you said, that paralysis that comes with it, that makes us think that nothing can possibly change or get better. And I think the hope that is a part of this story is a powerful one. I think
Mm,
for me, my personal hope for this story is similar, but also a little bit different, a little bit broader. Like that I'm a huge history buff,
yeah.
and I think stories like this remind us of the importance of having a full picture of history, not just as a nation, but also as a family,
Mhm.
right? And even the parts of it that aren't pleasant, there's that same tendency that you were talking about, manifest here. We don't want to talk about the parts that are unpleasant necessarily, but there's so much we can learn from those aspects of history. And I hope that this story might inspire others to reconstruct the history that they think they know, and to dig deeper into whether it's in their families or their communities or what have you, to kind of dig deeper to understand a more full picture of history.
Yes, there's so much there in terms of family wisdom that goes back through generations, and even when you're so far divorced from the places of your ancestors, you can learn so much. And I think it's important for all of us to do that. I think about that a lot. You and I are both daughters of immigrants,
Right.
and so we are so far removed from where even our grandparents lived. But there's so much, those tendrils of knowledge you were talking about, and how I grew up, and how you grew up, where that has cascaded through history. And so it's possible to go back and to find a lot of things that you might not even knew were there if you hadn't tried to dig for them.
Definitely. Right. And I think it's easy to get frustrated by even in a situation where we don't have the systematic erasure of cultural history and family history. It still can be difficult when you're geographically removed from it to find it,
Yeah.
and that can be frustrating. But I also think the exercise itself is important, because you may not find what you're looking for, but there's still something to be found.
Hmm. These are great hopes. I'm really excited about this story and what people will take away from it. And I get the feeling from this piece that people will read it and come away with things that you and I can't even conceive of right now.
Absolutely.
They're the stories I love to publish. Those are the ones that I love to see go out into the world, where you and I have our hopes for them. this happens a lot too at Hidden Compass because the stories are so complex and there's so much in there.
Right.
So I'm excited to see how people react to this piece and how this piece resonates with different people.
Definitely. Definitely.
And if it does resonate with you, this is the moment where we remind everyone watching that you have an incredible opportunity, that no other publication gives you this opportunity to read a story and to learn more about the author of that story. And if you're moved by what they write about, what they photograph, you can contribute directly to our partnership with them. So 50% of the proceeds of every campaign go to the author of the story. The other 50% go to Hidden Compass, so we can continue to publish the complex, non-obvious, beautiful stories that we are honored to publish. So please, please contribute to the campaign and share the story with people who you think would really enjoy it.
Definitely. I'll second that. And with that little announcement, you will still see us next week. However, we will be rebroadcasting the conversations that we've had over the last 5 weeks, and so we'll go back to the beginning in case anyone missed a conversation. They'll get another chance to view it. So you will see us popping up on Facebook at 4 p.m. next Tuesday, but those will be rebroadcasts of the previous article clubs.
And you can once again live through my confusion as to what year we're living in.
It's okay.
And to see, yeah, I know it's just such a crazy time where I don't even know what month it is. But what we do know is that every Tuesday, Savani and I are going to be here talking about these beautiful stories that we get to publish. So if you missed the first round of any of the article clubs and want to watch them again, we'll be back next Tuesday and we will see you then. We hope that you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Take care, everybody.